Good evening. Welcome to our Municipal Council agenda for Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. For the town of East Gwillimbury, I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask if there's any declaration of interest. Not seeing any, I will move to the land acknowledgement statement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of the Williams Treaty First Nation and other Indigenous peoples. And on behalf of the Mayor and Council, we would like to thank them for sharing this land. We would also like to acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and the waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and we join them in this responsibility. I'd like to move to community announcement. There are a few events since our last meeting. The East Gwillimbury Chamber of Commerce hosted their annual Spirit of Business Awards, which I attended along with members of council. I'd like to congratulate all the nominees and the award recipients. It was a wonderful evening. The town held their annual Remembrance Day service on November the 11th. This year, we were able to host our almost traditional service, permitting public attendance. Thank you to everyone involved and presenting a very respectful service. Moving on to the holiday season. This past Saturday was our first annual tree lighting event. The tree is absolutely beautiful with all the lights. Thank you to staff for a great job, and of course for our sponsor, Tiny Seedlings. The first of two Santa tours happened on Sunday in Sharon Hollow Landing and Queensville, a well-attended event despite the weather, and everyone was so excited to see Santa, including me. Thanks to staff for our Santa Claus Parade Committee and volunteers for their hard work for Mr. and Mrs. Claus for taking time out of their busy calendars to attend the tour. I'll remind everyone that the next tour is scheduled for December 4th in Mount Albert. Do members of council have any updates at this time? I'm not seeing any. Madam Clerk, would you like to provide an update regarding the status of written submissions in relation to item B?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, through you to council, I wanted to just advise council that based on the town's electronic council meeting protocols, members of the public are encouraged to provide written comments regarding matters on our prepared council agenda by 5 p.m. on the day of the council meeting. And all of the written comments will be then posted onto the published agenda. I wanted to just advise council that as of 5 p.m. this afternoon, we have received a total number of 35 written submissions regarding item M2, which is in relation to the Bradford bypass. I wanted to advise that perhaps council could entertain and recommend that these submissions be considered under item R, which is correspondence for consideration. And clerk's staff can obviously revise the agenda following tonight's meeting to incorporate all of these submissions.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. With that, we will move to item E, and that's COVID-19 updates.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening to yourself and members of council and others that have joined us. I'm going to pass it to Deputy CAO Mark Valchich for tonight's update.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Madam Mayor, through you, good evening. Not much really to add. The memo is very succinct and self-explanatory. The one point that I did want to highlight is I know there's an anxiousness to get back into the council chamber at some point as soon as we can safely do so. So the memo does highlight the fact that we're targeting Q1 of 2022 to start to phase back in some in-person attendance in the council chamber. Obviously, that will be dependent on COVID transmission trending and advice from our public health and provincial regulations. But we're going to maintain a sense of optimism at this point, and we certainly are preparing from the perspective of being able to conduct the meeting in both kind of a hybrid so-called method, which would be in person, as well as some virtual attendance. So we're anxious to see that happen, and we'll be prepared, and we'll keep you informed as soon as we're able to start phasing some of that back in. So that's all I really have to add, Madam Mayor. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Velchik? Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. I'm excited to get back in person. A little concerned that we're going into the winter months when with air quality issues and that cases tend to rise. I think it may be wise to be waiting a little bit longer, maybe more like Q2. I like the idea of doing the hybrid method, because I would encourage staff and members of council, if they're feeling at all under the weather, to call in virtually. Rather than having the pressure on people to show up when they might not be feeling well. So I like that idea. I want to ask a question about air quality monitoring and upgrades to the HVAC system in the chambers. Have we been doing any of that? Are we looking at a better position when we're going back as far as air quality and HVAC goes?
Madam Mayor, our facilities folks have been looking at working with Chris McPherson, who's sort of assessing the health and safety angle in terms of both protocols as well as facility fit. I can perhaps ask Mr. Karmazin if there's anything specific that we either have done or are planning to do in terms of air circulation. I know our staff are monitoring that and are aware that that's an important element. So, Mr. Karmazin, anything you could add to that question?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we have increased the filter medium. That's the density of the filters. We've gone to a higher rated filter, and we're also looking at increased frequency with the filter changes. So I can confirm that our facilities group has done that with our entire inventory of facilities across the board.
Thank you. And are we monitoring air quality? Do we have the ability to do that? And is that something that we're looking at?
Through you, Madam Mayor, specific air quality monitoring, we're not for particulate, certain types of particulate. However, the types of filters that we do have in our HVAC systems, they do remove up to 95% of the material in the airborne material. So we don't do specific air monitoring testing. That would be quite an onerous task, because we would have to be testing daily for specific types of airborne particulate. The best practice through ASHRAE standards, which is the North American Heating, Ventilation, and Air Conditioning Association, essentially recommends increased filter median as well as filter changes.
Thank you. And I wasn't suggesting that we check for particular particulates, because you're right, that's extremely expensive and onerous. It was more the turnover time, looking at how quickly the air changes over to fresh air within something like the chambers or within the office space within the council. Are we looking at turnover times?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, we do look at fresh air intake and air exchange. So that would be the discharge of air and then the fresh air intake, and that's measured in the cubic feet per minute. Yes, we absolutely.
That was the monitoring I was asking for. I'm glad that we're doing it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Any other questions of Mr. Karmazin or other staff this time? Not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crothers, Councillor Persicini, all those in favor? And that's carried. At this time, we have no deputations. We are at item G, and that would be presentations, and there are none at this time. Item H is adoption of minutes, and these are the minutes that were held on our meeting on November 2nd, 2021. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Morton, Councillor Crone, all those in favor? And that's carried. We are now at a statutory public meeting, and I have a lengthy discussion to start it off. Statutory public meeting statement for a mayor's introduction. Members of the public, this portion of the council meeting is a statutory public meeting under the Planning Act. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input on planning applications received by the town prior to a full technical analysis being conducted by our staff. No decisions to approve or refuse an application will be made here tonight. There will be presentations from both town planning staff and the applicants on the development applications. Following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the proposals. Submissions can also be made in writing. Then I will ask either staff or the applicant to answer questions related to the applications. Once we have heard from members of the public, I will ask members of council if they have any questions or comments. Your participation tonight is welcome, and by hearing all comments, we enable the making of an informed decision. It should be noted that a comprehensive report will be prepared by staff and presented to a future council meeting, assessing the merits of the application before us and providing council with a recommendation on whether the proposal should be approved, modified, or refused. It is very important that the town receive the names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this evening, or if you wish to be notified of any future council meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must provide your written information to the clerk. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have a right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Land Tribunal. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town before the bylaw is passed. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded for storing and broadcasting on the internet. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information is being collected and maintained for the purpose of sending correspondence relating to matters before council and creating a record that is available to the public in hard copy format and on the internet in an electronic format pursuant to Section 27 of the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Questions about the collection of personal information should be directed to the town clerk. I will now ask the General Manager of Development Services to begin with the presentations, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. As you mentioned, the item before us this evening is a temporary youth zoning bylaw amendment. We do have a information report in front of council this evening, and the purpose is really just to inform and solicit feedback from council and members of the public. Staff have a presentation, and I'll turn it over in a moment to our planner, Rena Zhu, who will present an overview of the application. Then we'll turn it over to the owner's planning consultant, Ms. Bonnie Tang. She also has a presentation, and I understand the owner is also in attendance this evening, Madam Mayor. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Rena Zhu to begin with the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council, and members of the public. I hope everyone is doing well tonight. My name is Rena, and I am the planner working on this file at the town. As Marco outlined, I will be providing a brief overview of the subject property, the proposed development, and status of the subject planning application. The subject property is located south of Holborn Road and east of Leslie Street, as shown on the map on this slide. Leslie Street is a regional road. Moving on to the next slide, I will begin with the site information. The property is 0.84 hectares and it contains 1 primary dwelling, 6 accessory buildings and structures, and 1 accessory building, which is the proposed garden suite as shown in the image on the slide. Please note the other accessory buildings on the subject property are non-habitable. Next slide, please. The subject property is located outside of the settlement area and is designated agricultural / long-term growth area, which are white belt lands within the town's official plan. This is shown in the gray color on the map. A watercourse that flows through a portion of the property is shown in green on the map, and the watercourse is designated as environmental protection area within the town's official plan. Garden suites may be permitted on the same lot as an existing single detached dwelling, subject to an amendment to the zoning bylaw and provided that adequate services are available. Next slide, please. As you can see on the map, the subject property is zoned rural within the town's zoning bylaw, and the surrounding properties are zoned rural as well. The rural zone permits a wide range of agricultural and agricultural-related uses, as well as a single detached dwelling. The applicant is proposing to change the zoning from rural to rural TX. The letter T followed by the number X is to indicate that the proposed garden suite use is temporarily permitted on the subject property until the permission granted by the site-specific temporary use bylaw expires, which will be 20 years from the date of passing of the bylaw. Next slide, please. The application is currently under review by internal departments as well as external agencies. Planning staff identified the following matters to be addressed before a final report is prepared for council's consideration. So what we're looking at is consistency and conformity with provincial, regional, and local planning policies, as well as the appropriateness and compatibility of the proposed development. The subject land is part of the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority regulated area. The application was circulated to the LSRCA, and after a preliminary review, the LSRCA has indicated that they do not have any concerns. Next slide, please. At the time of writing the reports and preparing the presentation, the town did not receive public comments. Next slide, please. In conclusion, staff will continue the technical review of the subject application, including discussions from today's public planning meeting. The applicant will submit a formal site plan application for the proposed use in the future for council's consideration. A comprehensive report with recommendations for the temporary use zoning bylaw amendments and future site plan application will be presented together at a future council meeting. Next slide, please. If anyone has any questions or would like to be notified in the future for information related to this application, please feel free to contact me with the information provided on this final slide. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask for if there are any questions before you leave us. I'm not seeing any from members of council. Thank you very much.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the next phase of this statutory public meeting is to review the presentation provided by the applicant/agent.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Bonnie Tang, and I am with Thorstone Consulting Services, representing the owners of the subject property located at 21035 Leslie Street regarding the zoning bylaw amendment application. A pre-consultation meeting was held with the town on February 25th of 2021, in which it was determined that a temporary use bylaw will be required to legalize the existing additional dwelling. Next slide, please. The owners had recently purchased the subject property in November of 2019. At the time of purchase, the owners were unaware that the additional dwelling unit was not permitted in the zoning bylaw and only realized through the town's bylaw enforcement. Thorstone Consulting was retained by the owners in February of 2021 to legalize the use of the additional dwelling unit. As shown on the air photograph, the principal residential dwelling is located by the front of the property and was constructed around the 1970s to 1980s. And the existing additional dwelling to the rear of the property was originally constructed between 1995 and 1999, but was rebuilt in the same shape, size, and location in 2009. There is an accessory building with a studio loft by the middle of the property near the south lot line, which is used as a workshop for storage. To the north of the pool, there is a cabana structure, and the rear southeast corner of the property also includes 3 small wooden sheds. Next slide, please. The principal dwelling is 305 square meters in size, while the garden suite is 137 square meters in size. In terms of parking on site, there is parking space available in front of the principal dwelling, as shown on the photo on the left. And as for the garden suite, there is also space for parking at the rear of the property. Next slide, please. This slide shows a few photographs of the garden suite's interior, such as the kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom. There are a total of 3 bedrooms in the garden suite. Next slide, please. This zoning bylaw amendment application is to legalize the second accessory dwelling on the subject property as a garden suite. The town's 2010 official plan permits garden suites as a temporary use for 20 years. We are requesting the approval of a temporary use zoning bylaw for the garden suite. No new buildings or site alterations are being proposed. However, the replacement septic system will be installed through the site plan process. Next slide, please. This zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted on the strength of 4.15.4 of the official plan, which allows for garden suites up to 20 years as a temporary use. However, since the 2010 official plan, the province has issued Bill 108 in 2019, which specifically provides for additional dwelling units and accessory apartments. The provisions of Bill 108 are generally intended to provide more affordable housing opportunities and increase choice and tenure for housing. The legalization of the accessory dwelling meets the provisions of Bill 108. The town has not had the opportunity to update the official plan to deal with such policies, but it is expected that the new official plan will provide for the provisions of Bill 108 on a permanent basis. We have identified that the accessory dwelling as a garden suite does meet the applicable policies of the town's official plan and zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. Section 4.29.4 of the town's zoning bylaw permits the garden suite use as a temporary use and outlines zoning provisions for garden suites. We have completed an in-depth review of the garden suite policies under section 4.29.4 A to G of the zoning bylaw and can confirm that the existing accessory dwelling does meet all of the zoning provisions of a garden suite. Next slide, please. Moving forward, we would finalize the site plan application, and as part of the justification for the proposal, we have engaged with a qualified consultant to demonstrate that the lands can support the necessary sewage system for the garden suite. And as part of the site plan and building permit process, the sewage system would be repaired and renovated. And the landowner is also on call if there are any specific questions regarding the property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would ask if there's any public comments, and if so, if the speakers would give their name and address, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can advise that Clerk's office has not received any registered speakers for tonight's session. However, I believe that the owners are on the call should council have any questions with respect to the application.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of council at this time? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Ms. Pang. Thank you for your presentation. I was just curious, with this proposal, will you be using one common septic system and well, or will they be separate for each residence building?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I have to take a look back into the technical reports, but the consultant has demonstrated that the lands can support the necessary sewage system for the garden suite.
Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor, the way I understand it in your presentation, I think, did a pretty good job of explaining that. But this, eventually we're going to catch up with our official plan next year. I hope that will conform with what has been passed with the province that is going to allow this the secondary residence. And I think we're going to see more of these in the future as the housing affordability crisis is upon us, with certainly kids looking to can't afford a new house, so they're building on mom and dad's lot. And I think for a lot of reasons it makes some economic sense. So I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I did see someone that was going to make a comment, and I've.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the owners are actually on the call and have raised their hand to speak and provide a response, I believe, to that question.
Very good. And the owner's name?
Hi there, it's Krista Pacheco.
Welcome. Good to have you with us this evening.
Thank you. I'm one of the owners at 21035 Leslie Street, and I just wanted to respond to your question regarding the common septic and wells. Currently, they are on separate systems, both a well and a septic. Our understanding is that the septic system that currently is here would need some renovations, and definitely it would be something that we would undertake to have done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Roy DiClemente, you have a question? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe this would be through you to staff. I believe it's implied here, but I'm assuming that we do not have a building permit on file for either 1995 to 99 or 2009 when the structure was renovated. I'm just confirming that that's also a bit of a wrinkle here.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. They will need to submit a site plan application and a building permit application for the garden suite once if the zoning is approved. Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. I recall several years ago when this arrangement was passed in council, and I recall that there are probably about 4 in town right now that are garden suites, and it was very cutting edge when we first heard about them, and how excited people were either to have adult children close by, or in the reverse, that adult children were welcoming their parents as part of this living arrangement. And it seems like the right thing to do if we can get all of our paperwork together. So I'm going to read the resolution with not seeing any more questions. Be it resolved that Development Services Planning Branch Report P 2021-29 dated November 16th, 2021 regarding temporary use zoning bylaw amendment application by Thurstone Consulting Services file ZBA 21-05 be received, and that the presentation, written and verbal comments made during the statutory public meeting regarding the temporary use zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Thurstone Consulting Service file ZBA 21-05 be received, and that comments presented at the statutory public meeting be addressed by Development Services Planning Branch in a comprehensive report to a future council meeting date. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persuccini, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We look forward to coming back in the future. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, I will move along to item J, Development Services. My notes indicate that there are no reports at this time. Mr. Ramuno, could you comment, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. That was the only item, but I did want to raise one matter to advise council and the members of the public who may not know that we have received just a couple weeks ago a site plan application for the replacement of the Sharon Public School. that's currently on Leslie Street. And so the site plan is for the replacement to the northwest corner of Morel and Charles Wright Crescent, right across from the existing Catholic elementary school. So it's a proposal for a two-story, approximately 70,000 square foot elementary school with a daycare facility as well, and about 100 parking spaces. So sometime in the new year, we'll be reporting that site plan to council for consideration and approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno, and I suspect immediately following that may involve a discussion regarding the present Sharon Public School on Leslie Street, perhaps shortly thereafter. Thank you. I'm going to move to item K, finance, and at this time, item number 1, we have a memo 2022 business plan and budget discussion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and members of council. Good evening. As you're aware, Monday we'll be starting our official budget discussions, and this memo is just on to just kind of give you an idea of the flow of those budget discussions for the 3 days. So I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that.
Any questions? I think everybody's very excited to get involved with budget deliberations. It's a highlight of mine for sure, and I think there's others as well. Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Can we set up a subcommittee to take a look at the budget for our the mayor and council areas that are under our oversight to make sure that they get that going through it with a fine-tooth comb as we did last year? I'm hoping we can do that again this year.
So through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we can coordinate that. We'll get that going as soon as possible, so we can have the discussions ready in time for our deliberations.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crone, Councillor Crothers, all those in favor? And that's carried. Item L is Community Parks, Recreation and Culture. Mr. Karmazin?
My apologies. Sorry,
No, thank you.
Technical difficulties. Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. Today we have one report and one memo prepared for council. The report is a Health and Active Living Plaza update and some additional sustainability options for council consideration. I would just like to add prior to discussion or any questions regarding the report, I'd like to add that the Health and Active Living Plaza is the greenest facility design in the history of the town. In July, council had provided direction to staff to proceed with detailed design with over 30 Thinking Green design features included with the Health and Active Living Plaza. In addition, at the request of the Environmental Advisory Committee, staff worked with a net zero consultant to include an additional 10 net zero concepts into the design. And I'd have to say that this was a very productive process. In addition, at the request of council, the report this evening provides an analysis and some recommendations based on some additional net zero options based on a business case analysis that was performed by staff, the architects, and the consulting engineers. The additional items do have a cost associated with them for both the design and the construction, which is provided for council in the report. Additionally, staff is requesting a portion of the consulting fees for the pre-construction phase of the project. This is essentially to prepare the project documents for all the authorities having jurisdiction, namely the Conservation Authority, York Region, and our own planning and building departments. This approval is required to maintain our schedule and to complete the design this year and to prepare the project for tender in early 2022. I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have related to the report.
Thank you, Mr. Karmazin. Questions? Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much for this. It really is the responsible thing for us to be doing. And I like how the report clearly outlines that we will see a payback from all of these various additions that we're looking at over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. And then after that, they start saving us even more money. So I think it's a very responsible thing for us to be looking at. And, you know, with the COP26 conference and the news that came out of that, what we're seeing in BC with the effects of climate change, I think doing our part as a municipality to make sure that a building that's the largest we've ever built is going to be as green as possible. So I thank you for that. I would like to seek my colleagues' input on the addition of the solar PV ready. That's an extra 150,000 in a building that's going to be 67 million in order to be ready for solar panels. And I think that in the lifespan of this building, at some point, we will want to be adding solar to it. So it would be prudent to have it ready so that we could add solar. So I would like to add that to the resolution if after I hear from my colleagues if how they're feeling on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councillor Roy DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I struggled with this one, to be honest. From where I'm sitting, we, I think it was just at our last meeting, had to change our development charges bylaw in order to be able to account for what I refer to as an eye-watering uptick in the price tag of this building. And for us to go and see a $20 million increase, for us to layer on what is essentially another $1 million in expenses seems somewhat, I guess we're overreaching, I guess is the best way of putting it from my perspective. The Thinking Green Development Standards and the net zero concepts that were already added in and layered in, I think really are delivering a top-notch facility. And so while I see the business case, I also feel that we're at a facility that's already going to be $67.5 million. Adding another $1 million before we've even put a shovel in the ground doesn't seem to be as fiscally responsible as I might like to see. But I'm open to having further discussions with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Councillor Persuccini, go ahead, and then Councillor Foster.
Madam Mayor, at this point, the longer we wait, it's going to cost us quite a bit. We already increased 20% of the cost, and I agree with Councillor Roy DiClemente. It would be crazy for us to keep, going higher and higher, and then we haven't even started yet. My concern is if the interest goes up in the next year, things are going to start changing. Labor, gas, everything's going up. We got to really, really be careful how we invest our money. And I fully, we might have to start tightening our belt on some of the stuff that we already said that we're going to do. But anyways, we can relook at a whole situation and dissect everything we can to try to keep our costs down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm not sure that Mr. Karmazin might be ready to speak to this, but I too was a little staggered when you looked at the 15 to 25% increase across the board and the amount of money we're looking at. I'm not suggesting that we hold off. I don't know exactly what I'm suggesting here, but is there an opportunity to get a report from staff that could address, should we be phasing this build differently? Is there something that we can not build right away to keep the cost down at this point? Or does the possible failure of the market to stabilize negate any savings that we might see anyway. I'm not sure exactly that's an awful mouthful to ask, but I'm just trying to get in my again, I'm not sure Mr. Carver's going to be ready to speak on that right yet, but that's a tough one.
He's turned his camera on, so I think he's prepared to speak to it. Mr. Carmazin, go ahead, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll do my best. What we have noted is unprecedented market conditions. And with those unprecedented market conditions, it's our job as staff to report that back to council and to make adjustments where we need to. And I can refer the finances to our financial experts, but we build services from growth, and growth pays for growth. And we have mechanisms in order to cover that growth off in those services. And that is where finance has done some good work, both with the development industry and internally to make adjustments to provide a response to these unprecedented market conditions. So with that, my recommendation is if we can afford to build it with the resources that we have through the development industry and through our development charge process, then it's my recommendation to proceed further. However, we could get favorable pricing, and if favorable pricing does come back under where we have budgeted, then again we have mechanisms to provide or recoup those costs back to the development industry, which has been covered off through finance. I would refer any further comment related to the finance again to our financial experts that have essentially worked on this solution in response to market conditions that nobody has ever seen. So,
thank you. Councillor Foster, go ahead.
I guess the second part of my thought process would be, how do we talk to our residents about this inflated pricing? Because I am sure that there's people out there that have taken the time to read this agenda that are saying, my God, we can't do this. So I look forward to some sort of messaging that we can put out to our residents that let them know that we still think we're okay, as Mr. Carmazin said, through our development charges program, that we can afford to build this facility.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Carmazin. Just so that I'm clear, these additional upgrades, sustainable upgrades, we can add. Are you saying that we can add them as you go? Not unlike when you're doing a renovation to your house and you think you're going to put in linoleum flooring, and then you find some more money and then you want to put in hardwood. Are we in a, or do we have to commit to this up front? I just want to be very clear on this.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we're at the point in the design where we would have to include them for the tender. So we would have to would have to integrate these concepts into the design at this point.
Okay. All right. So, Madam Mayor, just one more question. I'm looking at the item there you have on the agenda, high performance triple pane glazing, and the return on investment was 40 years. What is the lifespan of a typical window that we would put in? Because 40 years, in my mind, 40 years is way too long to have a payback, because you're probably going to be close to replacing it. So if you were looking for something to delete from the list, that would be pretty high in my list, that if we wanted to do some of these things, that would be one that would be first to go. But what, because even in our civic center, we're not even 40 years old yet, and have we been replacing windows there? I'm just trying to get a sense of, will these windows last forever, or is 40 years pretty much we're replacing them anyways? So, and if that's the case, then there's no payback.
Through Madam Mayor, that is correct. That is why we weren't recommending that particular concept, because the payback period was outside of the life cycle for the building system. So you typically between 20 and 30 years, you're going to start replacing your glazing. As an example, the Civic Center was built in 1991, and we're at the point now where we're replacing our glazing in that 20 to 30 year period. So absolutely, that is why that particular concept wasn't put forward as far as a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Madam Mayor.
Other questions, comments? Councillor Crothers, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to Councillor Foster for addressing the issue around the increased costs. I think it's an issue that we definitely have to grapple with, and thank you, Mr. Carmison, for the response on that. And it's something I think that we'll need finance to weigh in on. The increased costs are not something to be set aside lightly, but at the same time, the things that are before us today are just a very small fraction of that total cost. And they're the things that will generate savings down the road. So yes, we need to be tight and lean on this and keep the costs down as much as possible, but let's not save a nickel now and have generations ahead of us paying for this for generations, right? So to Councillor Persichini's comment about everything's going up, yes, absolutely. And that's why we need these energy saving type of additions that will only cost us 1.5% now, but will save us on operating costs down the road. It's the responsible thing to do. And I would hate to see us nickel and dime it at this point, and then future councils struggle with operating costs down the road. We know heating costs are going to continue to go up. And that's why I'm thinking the investment of these two items, as well as the PV, the solar PV ready, are really smart investments for us to be making at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just further to Councillor Foster's inquiry, and I think it's something, as we've said, we're going to have to address. I noted with some interest that one of our neighboring municipalities has just recently gone to tender, and they too experienced a dramatic increase. A facility that was supposed to be 30,000, sorry, it was supposed to be 30 million, was tendered at 50.2 million. And, that's somewhat in line with the pricing that we're seeing here. So it's not that we've designed a Cadillac gold-plated facility, but that we're responding to market conditions that may change, perhaps, when we go to tender, but they may not. And I think that our responsible answer is we're putting in place the plans to be able to afford to build it. That's why we updated the development charges background study and allowed for us to collect more in DCs. And that we have been responsible in not building it until we had the population base that could support it through property taxes. And so, that fiscal prudence is something that we've all, this council and councils before, have taken to heart. And that's sort of where I'm coming from, is our residents expect us to continue that cautiousness. And in my mind, I don't want to see us spend $830,000 unnecessarily. We absolutely need a pool, and we need to be able to have that facility in place. But whether it needs a pool cover that's fancy or not, that remains to be seen from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions, comments? I too struggle with adding on to the costs that we already have indicated. Going through a number of facilities in a previous employer, very rarely do they ever come in on target for a number of reasons, whether it's soil conditions or market conditions or labor or whatever. And I'm concerned that we are very early in this stage and adding substantially more along the way. I'm wondering, Mr. Webster, I'm going to speak to you, but perhaps it would be Mr. Marshall as well. We are coming up to our budget meetings almost immediately, and it would seem that that might be an opportunity or not. Perhaps I'm suggesting the wrong time, but I would think it would be an opportunity to delve a little deeper into some of these added costs to make sure that it's done right. And as Councillor Roy DeClemente has said, we don't need gold-plated. We need to have a pool. We don't have a pool in our community, the only one of 9 municipalities that doesn't. And it's high time that our community had the same facilities that others do, but we want to do it with good financial planning ahead of time. Mr. Webster, might you have any thoughts about somehow incorporating this discussion into our budget discussions, or another idea perhaps?
Madam Mayor, you're exactly on where we were as a staff team. At one point, this report was a sustainability update and a financial funding update, and we purposefully have kept the funding discussion for the budget. I will just commend staff and council for just the approaches we have taken. Councillor Roy DeClemente mentioned a neighboring municipality had significant increases in their MERC, they call it. I think it's a municipal recreation community center. They also, about a month ago, at York Region Council, issued close to, I think, $50 million worth of debt to fund that. And we're in a much different position. I think we have top facility staff as far as planning. I think that's been proven over the years where we've been able to bring good projects, good capital projects in on time and on budget. I think this last budget adjustment is a reality going forward. I think that the supply chain due to COVID is going to be interrupted for a long time. And I don't know if prices will ever adjust to where they were. I think we're living in a new reality. One thing I can assure our taxpayers is we're going to build this facility, and it's not going to cost, as far as bricks and mortar, our existing taxpayers dollars. The operating costs are being carved out in our budget, and I think a fulsome discussion of the funding options will allow us to better address some of the issues about phasing it or building a smaller build, or some of those questions as well. So I know that the finance team, as part of our budget kickoff next week, has set aside a considerable amount of time for the capital discussion. And this is by far the biggest capital project in town history. So I think it will be given a lot of time for council to deliberate to make sure it's comfortable in doing the right things.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think all the comments and discussion and further discussion would be invaluable. I do want to put out, though, that some of the upgrades, when you look at them, and I'm quite approachable on the concept of spending more money on this, because I think there's a business case for it, that it's not money that we spend and it's gone. We will be getting the savings back, and so it's almost like we're lending into the future and we'll be getting it back. And certainly with I would also support making it solar ready. Not that we install it, but we're ready. How many times, and I've been involved with a few organizations where we built our own buildings, and 10, 20 years down the road, we thought, geez, we wish we would have done it differently so we could have expanded up or out. And I think we will be kicking ourselves in the future if we don't at least make it solar ready. I think that's going to become more and more prevalent in the future, and I think there's a lot of, and it's an extra 150,000. I think it's well worth the investment, and we'll get it back. So, thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all for me.
Thank you. Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
As someone who has a solar installation on her home, I am very much in favor of solar. However, this, according to the report, says that it will add 2 months to our design time. So that delays our project by 2 months before we've even gone to tender. And then it adds another $1 million on top of the 830 we're already contemplating. Much as I like solar, I don't see that as an option for us at this point, given that we've already designed this building. We've already gone down the road with the design for this building pretty far, that we'd be basically asking them to revisit some of the work they've already done.
Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I think both Councillor Cronin and I are talking about the option to make it solar ready, which is not the $1 million option. It's not that it doesn't cause a delay. It just makes it ready. So that's at the bottom of that chart. There's no design time delay, and it's not $1 million. So that, I think that's what we're talking about. And I think a good point was raised by Mr. Webster that the operating costs are taxpayer funded, and this saves us operating costs. So the costs that the increase of 1.5% that staff are suggesting to add these save money for our taxpayers long term. So I think that's something to really keep in mind. Staff have presented a good business case here of things that will pay back within 5 to 10 years and then start generating savings for our residents. So I think this is a very prudent presentation that staff have made for us. And to Councillor Crone's point, things like the windows, they just don't make sense at this point. But the two that staff have suggested, plus the solar ready option, I think make a lot of sense from a business case. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? I brought up a few minutes ago about taking the time at our budget meetings coming up to delve into this a little deeper. I'm not sure if there's anybody else that feels the same way that I do, that I would like more information on a variety of these. And when we're talking about finances and comparators on where money is going for the next year, they would be lined up together. I'm not sure. Do I have folks that are interested in doing that, or are there other options at this time? I'm seeing some nods and Mr. Webster, can you speak on this? And I feel that we have varying views here and a motion that has 3 statements within it. And I'm wondering if it may be premature for this without a discussion, particularly during our finances.
Madam Mayor, one of the options council has is it could set the report aside to temporarily have the budget discussions, and we could bring this report back December 7th for decision. So that would introduce about a 3-week lag from where we sit right now, but I think it might allow for a more consensus position. I think that there is the ability, I see where you're heading here, that you don't want to have a split vote or not a full understanding by council. And the sustainability and funding are very intertwined from both a capital and operating perspective. So I would offer that up as an option to council. That the other one we may have is that we could possibly reintroduce this report at the end of the second day of budget deliberations if council wants to expedite it. So I think there's a few options that could allow it to be referred to the budget deliberations that are going to start Monday.
Thank you. Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Two thoughts. One, and it seems to me that we can't approve. My worry is delaying things further, and I was of the mind that we should be at least trying to approve the phase 2 pre-construction fees. But it sounds to me like we can't do that because we need to know whether or not we're including these options in the price tag. So if we defer this to the budget process, from my perspective, I'd like to have an understanding from staff of whether it's 67.5 million, whether it's 68.3 million, or whether it's 68.5 million with the solar ready PV. Those are all very similar numbers. And so I'd like to know where that money is coming from and how tight it really is. I know we've got money in reserves. Where else are we seeing the funding sources for this facility? How tight is it? And is that extra $1 million or so really going to make or break this facility? And truthfully, if it does pay off within 5 to 10 years, then it does make sense to do it if we can afford to do it. And I think that's the big issue that we're struggling with. At least I am. So for me, I'd like to hear from staff at the budget process without much more delay than that, where the money for the building is coming from, and whether it's 67.5 million or 68.5 million, it's still going to be eye-watering. But if we can afford it, then it makes sense to do it. Thank you.
Are you prepared to make a motion to move this to budget?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll propose that we move this report to, is it the second day of budget deliberations that we had suggested we would discuss it?
Mr. Webster, is it the second day or the first day of budget?
Well, the way we're doing it this year, Madam Mayor, is similar. We're going to go through the various departments and do the operating and then the capital. So this will be a large discussion under the CPRC capital component, which I believe is probably the first day. But what I was suggesting is allow time to digest this, and we could set aside specific time for it on the second day of budget deliberations to bring the actual report back into actually the council chamber and to once again allow for maybe more clear information of the decision and for council to provide a decision and direction.
Thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, what I will do is that I will move that we refer this report to the 2022 budget deliberations for discussion on Wednesday, November 24th, and request that staff present us additional financial funding strategy for the facility.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Foster. Madam Clerk, that would be moved by, oh, there you are. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, if you could amend that second resolution that council requests that staff present additional financial, I would like to the financial funding strategy to be presented to us for this facility. I think that's really what we're looking for here is how are we going to pay for it? Thank you.
Thank you. Questions on the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. I will just move back to see if there are any other comments at this time. sorry, on community parks, recreation, culture, is there anything else? We'll move to item 2 then.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, we're pleased to report a provincial grant to support enhanced programming for seniors based out of the Ontario Loft. This $25,000 grant will help offset the recent capital project that council approved. It'll offset costs of up to 50%. I'd like to thank Rhonda Pogue, our manager of recreation, events, and community engagement, as well as our finance staff for their success with achieving this grant. Be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. Karmazin? Good news story. Isn't that wonderful? That's great. Seeing no questions, could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Morton, Councillor Foster. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. And are there any other items at this time that we should be discussing?
Through you, Madam Mayor, nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item M, and that's community infrastructure and environmental services. Mr. Molinari, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This evening we have 4 memos for council's consideration. The first one deals with Center Street and Yonge Street revitalization update. And we're pleased to advise that both projects are well underway. With regards to Center Street in Mount Albert, the RFP for the public consultation is on the street. And we expect to review the proposals and award the work early in the new year. With regards to Yonge Street and Holland Landing, we're a little further ahead, but we've had our first public meeting and received feedback on the design concepts. We're refining those concepts and we'll return to council in Q1 2022 in order to get some buy-in, and then shortly after that we'll proceed with detailed design. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crone, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Mr. Molinari. I'm really glad to hear this is progressing. When do you think we'll be in a position to do some public consultation for the Mount Albert piece?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that will be following the award of that work in 2022. So I would expect that would be somewhere Q1, Q2 of next year. So we'd have to get the consultant on board and get them to review some of our documents that have been prepared previously, and then put a couple concepts together. But that's going to be something we want to fast track in order to get some initial concepts out and some feedback back.
Through you, Madam Mayor, fast track is the word I wanted to hear. I know there's a lot of folks in Mount Albert that are itching to see this get underway. So I appreciate anything you can do to expedite the consultation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any at this time. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crone and Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Are there any other items under community infrastructure and environmental services?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Our second memo is with regards to the Bradford bypass environmental assessment update. So staff provide the update to advise of the province's schedule and advise that much of the studies and reports to support the project, along with the impacts to the environment, are currently underway. A lot of those projects and studies were done for the original EA back in 2002. But obviously a lot of time has transpired since then. So they're updating. There's a lot of work to do in order to update those studies and bring them to today's standards. So although it may sound like there isn't a lot of information, there's a lot of information, but it's somewhat old. And they really wanted to make sure that when they bring that information forward, it's relevant to today's standard and is up to what we would expect to see in today's climate. So council asked for a draft resolution for consideration, and that resolution is appended to the memo for council's consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, Mr. Molinari? I'm not, oh, go ahead, Councillor Crothers, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to thank Mr. Molinari for bringing this forward. I think it's really important that we're on record asking for these detailed impact assessments. And it's quite a lengthy list. And I'm going to be happy to see the results of these. So thank you for putting this together. I'm happy to move this, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Foster, go ahead.
Again, thanks to staff for putting that one together. I know I kind of threw it a little bit of a curveball at our last meeting when I brought this one forward. There was one thing that I wouldn't mind seeing. I like the way it's all written up. 2C, I would really like to see that resolution have the words archaeological assessment with regarding lot 118 and the area with regard to the lower landing. I think we should have the lower landing named in there as lot 118 and the area of lot 118. I think it was in 2C, I believe.
Or yeah, under archaeological assessment.
Correct. I'd just like to see that, you know, specifically lot 118 and the area of it with regard to the lower landing.
Yeah, I might suggest that we say including but not limited to, because we want to make sure that it's encompassing a study that deals with the entire length of the project.
Absolutely, sounds good.
Thank you.
I just thought the words lower landing should be in there. Thank you.
What lot is that, Councillor Foster?
Lot 118 is where most think is the specific area. I like the not limited to because I believe it was kind of all the way along in there was quite extensively used.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I may, if it's council's wish to perhaps move the memo first and then consider the resolution as a separate item, that way we can communicate that to the ministry separately.
Very good. So we'll move the memo first. Mover to seconder, please.
Bear with me for a second. I think your computer is frozen. One moment, please. There we go.
Madam Mayor, may I ask another question while we're waiting?
Councillor Crone, just bear with us for a second. Madam Mayor was kicked out of the electronic meeting. One moment, please.
While we're waiting, Councillor Crone, perhaps you could say fluvial geomorphology 3 times fast.
That's pretty bad when you get kicked out of the meeting. It wasn't for bad behavior, I don't think, but I take it very personal.
But you just found out a better places.
Yeah. So we have the memo first. And do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Foster, Councillor Crone, all those in favor? And that's carried. And the second portion.
So through you, Madam Mayor, I'm just going to bring the resolution up onto the screen. And the only amendment that was made to this entirety of the resolution, which is the appendix attached to the memo, is the additional section with respect to lot 118 in the lower landing that was added.
Very good. And could we have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini and Councillor Crothers. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried.
Okay, through you, Madam Mayor. We have the next memo on our list is with regards to the East Townline Bridge emergency closure. Further to previous updates, we regret to inform Council that damage to the East Townline Bridge, which is located on York-Durham line between Queensville Side Road and Holborn Road. The damage is progressing, and our structural consultants are recommending that the bridge be closed. I guess at this point in time, with the winter maintenance season coming upon us shortly, it's unavoidable that heavy trucks and loading is going to be required on that bridge if we keep it open. So that was the main concern of our consultants, providing us some input on this particular structure. So we've consulted with emergency services, and we agree that closure is unfortunately the best option. We were really hoping that it would have been able to survive the winter until we replace it next year, but in the interest of safety, we feel that this is the best way to proceed. So we're also proposing to work with corporate communications to advise the public, and we'll follow our normal process to notify emergency services and any other stakeholders of this particular closure. And we hope to get our design underway very shortly and have that bridge replaced and in service as soon as possible. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just through you to Mr. Molinari, what about our neighbors who share this bridge with us? Have they been advised of this circumstance, and do they also have to pass a resolution, or what's the protocol here?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we've been meeting with Uxbridge regularly on this. They're part of the project team, and whenever we meet with our structural consultants, so they've been in the loop with this and an active partner every step of the way. So the bridge itself is under our jurisdiction in order to operate, and we don't really need a resolution to close it. We're just looking to advise council today, and if there are any concerns, deal with those concerns as appropriate.
Thanks very much.
Are there any other questions? Does it change any traffic patterns on any other roads that we have in that area?
Through Madam Mayor, well, there are a couple of houses that are impacted by this. No one's going to be without access, but it just means that for them to get to the other side of the bridge, they have to do a very roundabout route to do so. So they're part of the process. Part of the closure will be establishing a detour route so that people know how to get around this particular area. And we've also got some logistical issues with garbage collection with Uxbridge, et cetera, that we're working out. But there's nothing in it that we can't deal with. It just means a little bit of inconvenience for the short term.
Thank you. It would seem to me that it may be a good project for some type of a grant at even at the provincial level. When you're dealing with two regions and two municipalities, it may be one that we should keep our eyes open for and try and flag. It may make a big difference. It seems to me many years ago, I don't know if it was this one or the one that's further north, we received some funding by chance because it was affecting more than one municipality. Okay. Someone have music on there? Okay. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini, Councillor Crone, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Item number 4.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The last item is is a memo with regards to the Holland Marsh Polder Phosphorus Recycling Facility. This is a $40 million facility proposed to reduce phosphorus runoff into Lake Simcoe by about 40%. The federal government has announced funding in the amount of about $16 million, and York Region was going to fund the remaining 24 or 25 million as part of their Upper York Sewage Solution project. Unfortunately, though, with the Upper York currently being paused, the region's project funding is not available. So the proposed resolution requests that the province, the region, and the federal government work collaboratively to fund and potentially find a solution to be able to find the funding and move the project forward. So the draft resolution is appended to the memo for council's consideration, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While I realize this project was originally tied to the UISS and is sort of the funding was available through that project, it seems to me that part of the reason why we want to advance this is that it's good for the health of Lake Simcoe, and it's a fragile lake. And it seems to me that it's not just York Region and its watershed that's part of the issue, but that this is a watershed issue, and that it should be something that perhaps would be partially funded by other governments in the area. For example, the county of Simcoe or the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, or whomever. And I'm wondering if it's more appropriate for us to simply say that local governments in the watershed be respectfully requested to work together, simply because I think it's not just a York Region problem, and it's not just an East Gwillimbury problem. It's a much larger issue, and if it's worthwhile for the federal government to fund, then we should be seeing some contributions from other areas in the watershed as well. And perhaps it's the Conservation Authority that then takes the lead on this project, since it's for the health of the lake. So just my thoughts there. Thank you.
Also, Councillor Roy DeClemente, Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority is the only authority that spans that entire lake. So with the exception of Aurelia, but it would make sense that they would take a lead in that as well. Thank you. Question, Councillor Crothers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. It's great to see so many of our neighboring municipalities passing similar motions, that we're all on the same page with the importance that this is to the lake. I understand Barrie just passed a similar motion last night, so that's one of the biggest municipality to pass it so far. I think similar to comments about the bridge, this is another project that spans municipalities, and I think that's why the motion is looking to the province to support it financially. And so I'm happy with that. I think that the motion captures that it's not for us to pay, it's not for lower tier municipalities, but we're looking for the province for some of this funding. So I'm very happy to move this resolution as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I'm not seeing any. I have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Persicini. All those in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Yep.
Madam Mayor, just for clarity, I believe Council just passed a resolution with respect to the whereas clauses. However, the memo is still outstanding.
So we will have a mover and a seconder for the memo then, please. Councillor Foster, I think you had your hand up. And Councillor Morton, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Molinari, do we have anything else under community infrastructure and environmental services?
Nothing further at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We'll move along to emergency and community safety services. There you are, Chief. Good to see you tonight.
Good evening, Your Honor. Nothing on the agenda, but I have two items that I'd just like to mention tonight, if you don't mind. We're happy that we received our new pumper last week. If you remember from the 2020 capital project, the It was a pumper replacement for the truck out of the Queensville station. We took delivery of it last week under budget and on time, happy to say. And right now the crews are just going through the indoctrination training, and it should be in service next week if all goes well. So that's the first point. The second point, fire prevention was successful again this year, working with Firehouse Subs and their community grant, community safety grant program. We were approved for just under $10,000 for some community signage. So what we're planning to do with that funding is putting some messaging on the existing trucks, some decaling messaging on trucks, and working with CPRC to outfit some decals at one of the arenas. So as that happens, I'll make sure that we bring some updated pictures to your table.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. Any questions of the chief at this time? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a motion just to receive the chief's discussion? Councillor Roy DeClemente and Councillor Crone, all those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Horner, there you, oh, I thought I saw him. We're down to Legal and Counsel Support Services. There you are. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Just two items on the agenda this evening. The first is the matter of the snowmobile bylaw. And we were last before you talking about the snowmobile bylaw in October, and we had kind of a preliminary discussion about some of the complaints that we've received about the bylaw, and we were directed at that time to come back to you with a revised bylaw with some proposed amendments for your consideration before the snow flies. And so the snow came yesterday, and we're here with the bylaw today, and with that. I'll ask Jennifer Nichols, Manager of Bylaw Enforcement, just to give you some of the highlighted proposals, and then we'll be very happy to take your questions.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Further to the October 13th Council meeting, it was Council's direction to provide residents a survey. That survey was posted for to solicit some feedback from residents. We did receive limited feedback of 64 residents who participated in the survey. Based on this survey, the proposed changes were made to the draft bylaw. Operating restrictions from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Operating restrictions on a turfed boulevard, which is defined as that part of the boulevard improved with regularly maintained turf grass, as well as exemption sections for emergency personnel that isn't currently in our bylaw. I'm happy to answer any questions that council has.
Questions, comments? Councillor Foster, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm still not happy where this landed. I'm not sure what the answer is. I was quite interested to find out that there are towns out there with no bylaw at all. The operating restrictions and the times sit okay with me. I can understand that. My question would be around that is there are times when things happen and you just do not make it home by that the end of the operating time. So I would hope that if someone gets charged, they have the possibility of at least pleading their case and going from there. But I guess my real problem with this is, when we say a turfed boulevard, I know that there's a part in there that says it's regularly maintained, but if you can't ride on the snow, then we're telling our snowmobilers to drive down the asphalt plowed road with $200 or $300 worth of carbides on the skis and a few $100s worth of studs in the track that do not last very long on asphalt. So I'm really wondering about how many complaints we've had over the past, let's say 5-6 years, or how, you know, we'll pick a time period and have a look at that. And I guess the biggest thing that gets me here is this bylaw to me is dangerously close to just simply saying no snowmobiles in the town of East Gwillimbury. And I myself would hate to see that happen. So I don't know that I can support what you threw in front of us here tonight. So I'll just leave it at that and hope that there's some other comments.
Councillor Morton, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree with, excuse me, Councillor Foster, because I can remember actually riding on one of these things all through the winter and going up north and everything else. And we always had a wonderful time. There was nobody that was complaining about anything other than that we were staying off roads and everything. And I don't think that anyone should be charged just because they're doing that. And I have to agree with Terry.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Crone, then Councillor Persicini, then Councillor Crothers. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to staff and perhaps the rest of council. I'm hearing what my colleagues are saying, and this is a tough one to balance everyone's concerns, and it's not easy. And I would just throw out for you know, a suggestion that if the turf boulevard piece is the sticking point, perhaps we could make an exemption if you had an oral or written permission by the landowner to allow you to ride on their boulevard. I think that would promote good neighborliness and still maintain some respect. And I think that could be a compromise between both sides. I just throw that out there for consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Persicini, go ahead, please.
But this is a very complex, I don't know one of those snowmobile, I never had one. So it's not, I don't understand enough, but maybe if we're gonna do something, maybe we can fine tune some sort of a pilot project without making the bylaw pass that way, just sort of a pilot project to see what works, what doesn't work, you know, and then we can live with next year, we can kind of say, let's go for, you know, one season pilot project, see where it takes us and see the do's and don'ts, and then we can make a decision, we can finalize everything. Because like, I'm trying to understand everybody's point of view, and it's very complex here. It's, you know, but I would say to make everybody happy, do a little pilot project and stipulate some guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers.
Thank you so much. Like Councillor Morton, I've enjoyed off-road snowmobiling as well. I've also almost hit a snowmobile coming across my boulevard, and it's dangerous. And I think this is about safety, and safety has to always come first. There's many boulevards that have you know, decorative rocks and that sort of thing that can't be seen under the snow. I think it's only a matter of time before someone gets seriously injured. And like I said, that sight lines on driveways are set up for the road. They're not, sight lines are not set up for the boulevard. It's very, very difficult with some driveways to see the snowmobilers on the boulevards. And I would hate for us to put this off any longer and have someone get seriously hurt. So I'm very supportive of the bylaw as it's written. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Foster, go ahead.
The only other thing that I could mention is, has anybody ever spoke to, I know that we were getting complaints about an area, about someone going over the boulevard. Has anybody taken the opportunity to, you know, follow the tracks? It's simple, and speak to the person and say, you know, can you stay off that boulevard? We're getting complaints. And I guess the other thing that I should say is I'm not sure how enforceable this bylaw is. That, I mean, most of the bylaws we have issues enforcing them. That's kind of the lay of the land. But this one is, I think, going to be rather difficult. I mean, You know, what do? Take a picture of the guy driving by and then you trace him by the picture? And I'm not sure how far that would go. We had pictures of a guy stealing water and we couldn't really pursue that one because the pictures didn't work to our advantage. So I'm wondering how enforceable this is. And Jennifer, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you have any other thoughts. I'm not sure how this one goes.
Through Madam Mayor. Yeah, to your point, Councillor Foster, it is somewhat difficult to enforce. We could, failing that, just tracing the tracks to determine where the snowmobile goes. I mean, we've had incidents of ATVs, for instance, where the complainant knows exactly what resident the house where they reside, so it's quite easy to track that down. But yeah, there's definitely some challenges.
I guess my concern would be, we don't have a snow machine. We don't own one in East Gwillimbury. So how are you going to go through fields and valleys and wherever to track down these terrible people that have ridden across somebody's road allowance? And is it you, or are we going to be dealing at a different level of enforcement?
With all municipal bylaws, it would start with our bylaw branch that would enforce that. It may be helpful to do an educational piece as well with communications, just advising snowmobiles of snowmobile etiquette per se, and help and maybe helping to curb some of the behavior that some of the just takes a few snowmobilers to give them a bad name, and and maybe just promoting a little bit of that snowmobile etiquette might be helpful. Just a thought.
Are you suggesting that we do that before we enforce the bylaw and see if that might work, or are you advocating for the bylaw itself?
I'm advocating for the bylaw itself, but certainly if it's not council's direction to to pass the bylaw today, I mean, that's certainly a suggestion that may be helpful for residents, just to go through that snowmobile etiquette. Don't damage people, personal property, keep on the trails, that sort of thing. Just an idea.
I think what we have is a community, and I'm going to talk about Holland Landing because it's spread from Holland Landing, was a snowmobile club that were in existence for over 40 years. And while they were in Holland Landing, they did a lot of good work right across our community. I remember snowstorms where they rallied together to get people up their lanes. They would wait for the school buses, take the kids up their lane or home. And we still have, I would say some, certainly not a lot, but some people who live in Holland Landing who were part of that history, and they feel that it's, I guess, something that they're losing along the way. I see this as one of our unfortunate happenings when we become urbanized. And it was families that played together and worked together, and now it's almost like neighbors have to report about their neighbor or someone else who is riding a snow machine across town property. It's a very difficult one, and I've struggled with trying to sort out what we should be doing, and hearing about the opportunity to do some education within our community. Many people in our community probably have never been on a snow machine, but those that have, particularly in our 3/4 of our land from Mount Albert to I would say Woodbine, is is rural and they're still hidden in a barn somewhere, and people still ride them on occasions for their pleasure. So I find this one very difficult, and I'm concerned for you on how on earth you would enforce it. And I if we're going to pass something, I'd want to make sure that there was the ability to enforce it, not that we looked foolish at the end of the day, that going through fields and whatever to follow tracks, I'm just not sure is exactly what we need to be doing with some of our fine staff. Councillor Persicini?
I think what we should do, suggested, I hope my colleagues support this, is to do park this thing for a while and do more educational, see where it takes us. And then we can revisit. I mean, it's poor Jen. I mean, Jennifer, drive her crazy this way. How do you enforce it? I think we should park it, revisit, do more education as much as you can, promote the education about safety, and then revisit again. I mean, we could dissect this all night long. All of us. There's a lot of us here. Let's do it. Let's do something smart. Let's just park it. Let's do educational stuff. Let's really work on this thing, and then we can revisit again. I mean, what don't? It's crazy.
Is that a motion that you're making, Councillor Persicini?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Thank you. I have two other people speaking, Councillor Crone and then Councillor Crothers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to staff and council. With all due respect to my my good friend, Councillor Persicini, we've been working on this thing for 2 winters now, and I really don't want to park it. I think we need to make a decision. I like your earlier suggestion. If we look at it, maybe we rerun it for a winter, see, what worked well, what didn't, and work out the kinks. Because you want to be careful. You don't let this pendulum swing too far the other way and overcorrect. And I think, I think Councillor Foster certainly is, that mindset that we might be overcorrecting here. But to Councillor Foster's earlier point, that one of the residents that I spoke to, they did know who was the person going across their lawn, spoke to them, and the way they relayed it to me, the neighbor was quite indignant, said, "Sorry, there's no bylaw. I can do whatever I want." And then the second, there was another example given to me by another resident where the person hit the decorative rocks that Councillor Carruthers spoke of, spun around, and by the time he got out to her driveway to assist, he had hopped on his snowmobile and took off. So, to me, I think if we wanted a happy medium, I'll go back to my earlier suggestion, and I would make a motion on this, that we add to the exemptions or places where you have an oral or written permission to drive on their boulevard. And that, I think that goes back to promoting respect, good neighbors, and we see how that works. At least, I think it's a happy medium that might make some sense. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I've been listening to the discussion with interest, just because I think I share the struggle that we've got a history here of the snow machines being a really important part of outdoor recreation for our residents, and it feels like we're kind of being party poopers if we try and take that away from folks. And at the same time, however, we do have statistics. They're modest, but we have statistics that tell us in the chart that that residents do have a concern, regardless of whether we allow it on the boulevards or not. I do think we need to amend the bylaw to allow for the hours of the restricted hours. I think that is a smart move on our part, as well as to provide the exemption as Ms. Nichols has suggested. So there's 3 things that she's trying to accomplish with this bylaw. One is the hours of operation that should be restricted. I'm fine with that. Secondly, the exemption for town officials and enforcement officials. from YRP. I'm really struggling with the driving on the boulevard piece of it. I truly am, because I know it's completely impractical and not possible to see it in our new subdivisions. But in some of our existing subdivisions where the houses are further apart, and there's trail connections that people are trying to connect into, be it in the east, in the green belt, or in the further west. I don't know if there's a real answer or not. Perhaps that part needs to be parked. I don't see, unfortunately, I don't see how enforcing Councillor Crone's suggestion of saying, well, you can do it if you have the written or the verbal permission from the landowner. That I think is actually introducing further complications for enforcement for Ms. Nichols. And I'm also struck by the fact that we've only had 2 complaints. They've been vocal complaints, but they are only 2 complaints that we've had. So I'm feeling like there may be a problem that we're trying to address that doesn't truly exist. And I'm really torn by it, but I think we do absolutely need to update the bylaw at the very least. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Councillor Crothers, go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's dangerous when we use words like take away. I don't think anyone's trying to take it away. I think to me, this is about safety. And while there's only 2 formal complaints, it's something I hear about constantly here in Holland Landing. People are very upset with the driving on the boulevards. They don't complain because they don't know how that would help. They don't formally complain, I should say. So if we want to wait until we get more complaints, I mean, I can encourage people when they talk to me about it to submit a formal complaint, but I don't think that's really the way we normally operate. We've asked staff to pull this together, and Ms. Nichols done a fantastic job. We've seen what the residents think about it, 72%, to Councillor Roy DiClemente's comment. It's not a huge sample size, but there is quite a number of people who do have concerns. So we know that our residents have concerns. I think whenever we introduce a bylaw, we always start with that education piece. So I think that piece is part of our regular practice. No one's chasing people across fields on day 1 and laying charges. I'm sorry, I had to laugh when I had some visuals when Madam Mayor was talking about going across fields. So I think that it's an education piece. It's another tool in our bylaws tool chest when there are repeat offenders who just don't want to listen to the educational piece, who don't want to be nice neighbors. This is not about going after people who just need, to know that maybe you should talk to your neighbor before crossing their boulevard. I think this is it's a tool for Ms. Nichols to use when we do have people who are creating dangerous situations. So I'm very much in favor of the bylaw as is. As I said earlier, I'm very happy to move this as is.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? About 10 minutes ago, Councillor Persichini struck some kind of a motion, if I do recall. And Madam Clerk, do you have what he had indicated? We'll start with that one and then we'll move our way along. Thank you. And I specifically did ask you if it was a motion and you said yes, so that's why I'm going back to that before we go anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe the intention was to carry out a pilot following the approval of the bylaw, but perhaps Councillor Persichini can provide further clarity.
Thank you. Councillor Persichini?
To revisit it after we do pilot, then we can make a decision. I mean, you go ahead.
No, finish up, please.
To revisit down the road to see how we went, and then we can actually put the bylaw there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roy DeClemente, you had your hand up.
I was just seeking a bit of clarification. So the motion is that we receive the report, that we approve the amended bylaw as presented, and that staff carry out a pilot. Does that include the public education portion of the discussion that we had?
Yes.
And then report back to us in the spring of 2022 on how things went with the bylaw?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And do I have a seconder for that motion? I'm not seeing. Councillor Foster, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, I'm unclear as to why we would approve the updated and revised bylaw and then revisit it. I think we want the pilot project and then we revisit to see if we approve.
I'm okay with that too.
Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead.
Thank you. I think in order for us to be able to assess the bylaw's effectiveness, we need to put it in effect. And that's the only, I think that's the only mechanism available to us at this point. Any bylaw can be repealed. And so if it comes back to us that it was a horrible winter and you know, this didn't work and we need to change it, then we can amend the bylaw accordingly. But I think you need to put something in effect so that you can assess its effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion, sorry, Councillor Crothers, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm unclear what the pilot is. What exactly is the pilot?
We try it out and see how it goes. And if it's not written in stone, then we can go back, and if it doesn't work out, we can deal with the situation.
So it's my understanding, according to what Councillor Roy DeClemente just said, that we can always revisit a bylaw. So we need to enact it, and then with the public education piece, and then staff report back and we take a look at the bylaw again. So I'm not sure that pilot is the word that you're looking for there. I think that the idea is that we want to reassess it after the first winter. I think that's the point that is trying to be made here. And I just think that the word pilot in there, we would need to have terms of reference if we had a pilot.
What I meant, that's all I care.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. So I think we can just take that pilot out. Thanks.
So is there an understanding for what Councillor Persichini has suggested at this point? That council requests staff to undertake public education and that council requests staff to reassess the bylaw and report back in Q1 2022. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Crone.
Madam Mayor, we've got a note in the chat. It needs to be 2023. I think the clerk has just caught that.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Crone, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, would it not be more appropriate for Q2 2022? Because that gives us one winter to try it.
How about spring 2022?
That makes sense.
Q2 2022.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this? And we do have a seconder that I haven't noted here, and that was Councillor Crone. Okay, seeing no other questions, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll have another look at it in the spring and see how it worked, how it attended some of the concerns that we had, and I'm looking forward to seeing some some public information out there as well. I know we can get it from the Ontario Snowmobile Association, etc. In fact, they may even take out an ad in one of our papers if we requested them to do so. And then we can assess exactly how it worked and how our bylaw officer sees what is taking place out in the community. And if in fact it's 1 or 2 people, or maybe this is the year where there's none, it could be a year where there's many more. It'll all depend on how much snowfall we have. Thank you. I'll move along now with
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's one more item on the agenda, and it's just a brief memo kind of relating to a bylaw that's also on the agenda at the end of the evening. Basically back in 2004, the town sold part of the unopened road allowance that is Peter Street to 2 different people. But what we didn't do at the time was we didn't register a bylaw to stop up and close that part of Peter Street to terminate public access. So what we have today is we've got a vendor. It's not a vendor, but we've got a lawyer for one of the owners who's kind of come to the town and said, would you please enact and register this bylaw? It should have happened in 2004. And so I just wanted council to know that's what's at the back end of the agenda this evening. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. A little bit of house cleaning.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you. Any questions on this item? Not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy D. Clemente and Councillor Councillor Crothers, you have your hand up.
Just seconding the motion.
Thank you. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Horner, are there any other items for us this evening from Legal and Counsel Support Services?
Nothing else to report, Madam Mayor, but very happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Horner? I'm not seeing any. We will move along to administration. And at this time, we have no reports. Mr. Webster, is there anything for discussion with us this evening?
Nothing to add at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Webster? I'm not seeing any. We'll move to corporate services. And we have no reports at this time. Are there any items that should be discussed that are not in front of us today?
Nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Anything from members of council for Mr. Velchik? I'm not seeing any. Away we go. We will move along then to correspondence for consideration. The first one we have is regarding the Ontario Municipal Administrators Association. Any questions on this one regarding OMERS? I'm not seeing any questions. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini, Councillor Morton, all those in favor? And that's carried. Item number 2 is regarding the Bradford bypass. Any questions on item number 2? Councillor Crothers, go ahead.
Thank you. It's just a procedural question. This correspondence came in to inform us on our previous item where we were passing a resolution with respect to this. And it seems odd to be having this correspondence come up after we've already made the decision, when the intent of the people who wrote was that it would help inform our decision. So I'm just wondering if, procedurally, if there is a way when we get correspondence to have it attached to the item that it is referring to make sure that we're seen as considering it at the same time or before we are making a motion that is referring to. Procedural question.
I would suggest that is a very good idea. However, this wasn't received. It's dated. I stand corrected. It might have been received by the time we made the decision. If we've made a decision and we receive correspondence after, I'm not sure how we deal with it. Mr. Webster?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The agenda I'm looking at says it be forwarded to staff. This is a provincial project. It's not a town project. We passed a resolution tonight. I think that this correspondence should be respectfully forwarded to the province as well for input into their process. So I think that it shouldn't just be forwarded to town staff. It should be forwarded to staff. Should have maybe what it should have been is forwarded to us as part of our deliberation this evening and to the province for their move forward and full assessment of the Bradford bypass.
So my question is around that we are dealing with this and deciding whether it needs to be referred to staff outside of our previous discussion tonight in the same agenda where we talked about the Bradford bypass. So I'm just asking procedurally, when there is correspondence that's linked to a item on the same agenda, is there a mechanism for us to make sure that we are receiving that correspondence in advance of making a decision on that same agenda, not a previous agenda, but when it happens on that same night, when people are submitting their input, I think it's prudent for us to be receiving that before making a decision.
Through you, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Perhaps I can provide some clarity. This correspondence was actually received prior to the staff report that is presented before you. So the intent was to simply place it here as part of the previous resolution, which essentially directed staff to report back on the Bradford bypass. We do typically link items that are related to a staff report. So for instance, earlier on, we had a memo from LCSS as well as a report that we're linking it to a bylaw, for instance. So we do tend to put that in effect. However, this was unfortunately not captured in that sense. I have taken your comments and I will look into some municipal best practices to identify whether we can incorporate written submissions in relation to an agenda item. So that's certainly something that we can look into to further advance our procedural bylaw to allow for that. I did want to point out something to you, Madam Mayor. Earlier at the beginning of the meeting, I had identified that we had received 35 submissions in relation to the Bradford bypass. Perhaps council would want to entertain consolidating those 35 with this other one on the agenda. So what we can do is perhaps receive everything and deem it as 36 items and forward it to the Ministry of Transportation.
Thank you.
I'm seeing nods for that. Could I have a official motion that we would move those? Thank you, Councillor Roy DeClemente and Councillor Crone. All those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I will move now to item 3, and that's correspondence from St. John's Ambulance requesting an exemption for the town permitting policy to grant the use of a town facility to carry out training for medical first responders on a weekly basis free of charge or at a discounted rate.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I think more information is required about which facility, when they want to use it, and such forth. And I'm not sure if General Manager Karmazin has that detail, but this is a very open request.
Mr. Karmazin, have you spoken to St. John's Ambulance regarding the facility? Do they have something in mind?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have not. I know as much as council based on what how the letter is written.
Thank you. I think, thank you, Mr. Webster. I think if Mr. Karmazin, you could go back to them. They are a very good organization. However, we do know that as soon as we open our doors, there is a cost to us, and the decision needs to be made by us on whether that cost is palatable to members of council. I know they do terrific work in our town and throughout our region, and probably much further as well. Perhaps we can have it come back to us after Mr. Karmazin has the opportunity to take a look at what facility may be the best. I'm not sure if they're looking for a hall the size of the Canada Hall, or if they're maybe looking for something that's more the size of River Drive Park facility. One never really knows, and based on what we have received here tonight. So perhaps if we could have it come back and we could make a more appropriate decision. I'm not sure that it discusses year round, whether they do operate in the summertime, and for us, the operation of or using one of our facilities in the summer could be problematic. So we should sort that one out in advance, but I'm sure that's a question you'll be asking Mr. Karmazin anyway. I have two questions, Councillor Foster and then Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the one thing that we need to ask is, certainly St. John's is a great organization. Are they generating revenue from the training that they would be putting on in our facility? Or are they just covering their cost? And if they're covering their cost, then our cost should be covered too. We run the risk of setting a precedent here, I think. And like you say, it costs us money to open the place.
In the first paragraph, it indicates that they're to carry out training for medical first responders. So I would assume that is those people who are actually St. John's ambulance members, but let's find out for sure. Councillor Roy DeClemente, you had a question also?
Thank you. More just a comment. I was certainly heading in the same direction as Mr. Webster was suggesting, which was that we would receive and that we would refer it to staff to gather more information and report back to us. I too would like to know what are other municipalities doing? They're a regional organization, so what's their relationship there? What needs do they have? And perhaps if it's not a question of if it's a question of cost, perhaps maybe there's a way for us to do an arrangement for in-kind services at our events, because I do know that we pay them to be in attendance at some of our larger events. Maybe that's part of the arrangement, is it's a discounted rate, and in exchange we scratch each other's backs. But certainly welcome to hear further information from Mr. Karmazin and his staff, and I'm happy to make that motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Or perhaps we end up with having 20 people from East Gwillimbury who are trained as St. John's ambulance that had never even thought about it, but it's in their own backyard. So I think there's a positive to it as well. So thank you for the motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. I don't have any other items at this point. We have no resolutions. I have two bylaws. Under T, bylaw 2021-099 being a bylaw to regulate, govern, and prohibit the operation of motorized snow vehicles in the town of East Gwillimbury, and that's in relation to item 01. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini, and a seconder. Councillor Crone, all in favor? And that's carried. Second bylaws 2021-100 being a bylaw to stop up, close, and convey part of Peter Street. I have a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Crothers, Councillor Foster, all those in favor, and that's carried. Other business, December 21st, Council Education Workshop cancellation. Please take that out of your calendars. I'd hate to see you sitting somewhere all by yourself. So let's thank you for letting us know well in advance. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Persicini, Councillor Crone, be it resolved that Council requests staff to cancel the December 21st, 2021 Council Education Workshop meeting. All those in favor? And that's carried. I have a confirming bylaw. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persichini, Councillor Morton. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-101 being a bylaw to confirm proceedings of council being held on November 16th, 2021 be taken as read and acted and signed by the mayor and municipal clerk. All those in favor? That's carried. And I have an adjournment at, my clock says 8:09. Moved by Councillor Crone, seconded by Councillor Roy DeClemente. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Keep well. Thanks for a great evening, and we'll see you at our next meeting. Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Have a good night.
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 Good night.